I thought I was marrying into love. I didn't realize I was marrying into a hierarchy. My name is Dan. I'm 24 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And at the time, I was broke and finishing up a degree in digital media while working nights at a gas station near campus. She walked in just after 1 in the morning in heels too expensive for that side of town, wearing this slim cut gray coat and carrying a tote bag full of books. She grabbed a Red Bull, paused at the counter, and asked what I was reading. I held up the battered paperback copy of Slaughterhouse 5. She smiled and said, "You know he wrote that while selling sobs?" We started talking about Vonnegut, then detoured into absurdist theater, then local food trucks. She bought the Red Bull and stayed for another half hour, just leaning on the counter while I cleaned the coffee machines. Her name was Lindsay, grad student in urban studies. Came from money, not in a flashy way, but the kind that comes with piano lessons and family ski trips and a condo off campus her dad bought when she started grad school. I figured it was a one-off conversation, but the next night she came back, and the one after that. Within a week, she was leaving little notes in my glove box. Inside jokes, song lyrics, sketches of tiny mice holding coffee cups. 2 weeks later, she was cooking me dinner in the little apartment I shared with 3 other guys who barely knew how to microwave rice. She brought over her cast iron skillet and a basil plant, and somehow made spaghetti taste like something out of a restaurant. 6 months in, I had moved into her place. No more fighting over who left a sock in the shower. No more mystery leftovers in our shared fridge. Just her condo with its pale gray walls and the vintage globe her father gave her as a joke gift. It all felt grown up in a way that thrilled and terrified me. I proposed with a modest ring I bought on a $300 credit line and paid off in 12 installments. Her fingers were so slim, I had to get it resized twice. She smiled when I knelt down in the campus quad, whispered yes, and kissed me like I was something rare. I remember thinking, this is it. She sees me. The next week, her father invited me out to lunch at a place with cloth napkins, ordered for both of us. I tried to thank him for raising such an amazing woman, and he waved it off. He said he admired initiative. Then he pulled out a brochure from a jewelry store and offered to upgrade the ring. Something a little more her speed, he said with a chuckle. That was the first time I noticed the crack. I told him I appreciated it, but we were good. He just smiled like I was cute for trying. I didn't say anything to Lindsay. I wanted to believe that love could erase the gap between dusty boots and summer homes. I wanted to believe that her showing up at my gas station meant something more than a phase. I told myself I had earned this. Her, the condo, the chance to start over in a life with real silverware and framed art. What I didn't realize was that the ring was just the start. There were levels to this thing I hadn't even begun to understand. And I was still at the bottom. Respect, I'd find, wasn't something they ever intended to give me. Lindsay's family lived in a gated community just outside of Bexley. 5-bedroom homes, manicured lawns, and neighbors who waved without ever asking your name. Her dad, Paul, ran a logistics company and owned 3 cars. Her mom, Denise, hosted charity brunches and arranged flower bouquets for fun. They summered in places with names I couldn't pronounce and skied every December in Colorado. The first holiday I spent with them was Thanksgiving. Her mom wore pearls in the kitchen and served the stuffing in a ceramic dish shaped like a cornucopia. Her dad carved the turkey like he was performing surgery. I brought a bottle of bourbon I'd picked up from a small distillery where I'd done a website redesign, and Denise smiled like I'd handed her a bag of gravel. Lindsay's husband, they introduced me. He's very creative. That was the title they gave me. Not web designer, not digital media grad, not even small business owner. Just very creative, like I was some kid scribbling in a coloring book. At first, I laughed it off, told myself it was just unfamiliarity. If I showed them my work, maybe they'd understand, maybe they'd respect it. But every time I brought something up, a logo I was proud of, a contract I landed, Paul would lean back and say something like, "It's good you're keeping busy." Or worse, "Who'd you know on that city council to get the gig?" Joking, of course. Always joking. The first time I mentioned I was working on the Columbus tour website redesign, Denise blinked and said, "Isn't that mostly volunteer?" It wasn't. It was a real contract, a big one, But to her, if it didn't come with a suit and a nameplate, it might as well be a hobby. Brianna, Lindsay's younger sister, was worse. Blonde, polished, and constantly scrolling. She corrected my grammar at dinner parties. Once I said less people instead of fewer, and she actually stopped the conversation to point it out. I just can't help myself, she said with a laugh. It's the English major in me. I kept thinking, all right, I'll earn it. I'll show them. I started dressing better, speaking more carefully, using the word portfolio instead of freelance work. I stopped mentioning my early clients, the vape shop, the biker bar, the tattoo place. I curated my stories. I cut the rough edges. Still, nothing changed. One weekend, Paul invited me to golf. I didn't own clubs. Lindsay suggested I rent some, just for the day. I spent 6 hours pretending I knew what a 5-iron was, while Paul and his buddies called me tech guy and asked if I could fix their phones. I smiled, nodded, and nearly broke my back trying to swing right. When I got home that night, my palms were blistered and my face sunburned. Lindsay said, "It's sweet he invited you. That means something, right?" I wanted to believe that. I really did. But it always circled back to the same thing. To them, I was someone Lindsay had chosen despite where I came from. And every time they smiled at me, it was through that filter. The worst part, I kept trying. I read The Economist so I could join their conversations. I learned the names of their wine varietals. I even helped Brianna set up a website for her consulting business. She didn't pay me. Said she'd shout me out on her socials. Never did. And when I landed that city tourism project, the biggest contract I'd ever had, I thought maybe that would change something. We were at Denise's house, open floor kitchen, soft jazz in the background, cocktails with orange peels in them. I mentioned it casually, like I wasn't dying for validation. Brianna laughed. "Oh my God, that? You know someone on the city board or something?" Her voice was light, dismissive, like it was too absurd to be real. Paul raised an eyebrow and grinned. "Hey, connections count. Nothing wrong with a little help up." They all chuckled, even Lindsay. She was sipping wine, her phone glowing in her lap, and she didn't say a word in my defense. That night in the car, I asked her, "Did you really think it was a favor job?" She glanced at me, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your family thinks I'm only getting work because someone's doing me a solid," and you laughed, like they were right. She shrugged. "It's just how they are, Dan. Don't take it so personally." But I did. How could I not? It was the slow erosion of self, moment by moment. Every smile that didn't reach their eyes. Every polite nod that translated to, "You're not one of us." Every time I was Lindsay's husband, very creative, and never Dan, the guy who built his own business with his bare damn hands. I started to realize it didn't matter how much I earned. I could triple my income and it still wouldn't be enough. Because they didn't want me to measure up. They wanted me to stay where they put me. Smiling, grateful, at the bottom of their invisible ladder. Instead, they got used to not noticing me. When Lindsay landed that big promotion, senior urban planning consultant for the whole Tri-County development region, there was champagne on the kitchen counter and congratulatory texts buzzing her phone nonstop. I was genuinely happy for her. She worked hard. She deserved it. But the moment we clinked glasses, it was like a silent shift happened. Not a conversation, not an agreement, just an understanding that I'd start managing everything else. It started with little things. She asked if I could handle the grocery runs during the week since she'd be in back-to-back meetings. Then it was, "Can you call the contractor about the kitchen reno?" Followed by, "Would you mind organizing the guest list for Brianna's bridal shower? She's slammed right now." I told myself it was temporary, just until this project wrapped, just until the quarter ended. But the quarter came and went, and I was still the one waiting for the HVAC guy, still emailing travel agents for her work trips, still managing the budget on the new furniture for the living room refresh. At some point, I stopped even trying to bring in new design clients. I let my freelance profiles sit idle. I told myself I'd jump back in next month, then the month after that. Somehow, I became the guy behind the scenes, the one who packed her lunches in glass containers and made sure there were clean shirts on hangers, the one who waited in line at the bakery for a gluten-free cake for her coworker's birthday, the one who RSVP'd to things and never got mentioned in the photos. At parties, people would ask, "And what do you do?" I used to say I was a designer. Then it became, I used to do freelance digital work. Eventually, I just smiled and said, I keep things running. Nobody asked what that meant. Denise started calling me for errands. Could I pick up a gift bag for the Rotary auction? Could I meet the cleaner at their condo downtown since she had a lunch thing? Brianna once texted me from a salon asking if I could drop off her backup shoes because her heels were killing her. And like a fool, I kept doing it. Every favor, every task, every gesture, I convinced myself it was just what supportive partners did. I started thinking that maybe invisibility was just part of being helpful, that if I stayed agreeable, stayed useful, they'd see me differently, not as the guy who didn't fit in, but as the one they could rely on. Then came Brianna's wedding. She made me the coordination point of contact, her words. I spent 3 months managing vendors, juggling RSVPs, and dealing with a florist who forgot half the order. I held an umbrella over her dress in the parking lot when it started to drizzle. I shuttled guests between the church and the reception in our SUV because the shuttle company was late. Nobody thanked me. Not once. At the reception, I stood off to the side near the bar, sipping a watered-down gin and tonic, watching everyone toast and laugh and pose for pictures. I wasn't in any of them. Later that night, Lindsay's mom pulled me aside, her tones soft and condescending. You know, Dan, she said, you ever thought about taking some community college classes just for structure? It might give you something steady to focus on. I blinked, trying to process what she meant. She smiled as if it was helpful advice. It's easy to drift when you're not tied to anything. Not tied to anything? I wanted to scream. I was the rope holding their whole operation together. I was the one who turned chaos into schedules, who made sure things got done. I went home that night and stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth while Lindsay talked about how gorgeous the venue was. She never asked how the day had gone for me. Not once. I looked at myself in the mirror. My hairline had started to recede. I hadn't designed anything in months. My business email had over 200 unread messages. I looked tired, older than 30. And the worst part? I barely recognized the guy staring back. He wasn't a designer anymore. He wasn't building anything. He was just available. The family never meant to erase me. That would require acknowledging me in the first place. They just used what I offered and got used to not asking where it came from. I kept telling myself it was love, that one day they'd look up and finally see me. But the longer I stayed quiet, the easier I made it for them to forget I was ever there at all. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew I wasn't going back. It was a humid July Saturday, the kind where the air sticks to your skin even in the shade. Lindsay's parents threw one of their annual backyard barbecues, this one bigger than usual because Brianna had just gotten back from her honeymoon. Paul had hired a catering team. Denise had arranged hydrangeas in color-matched vases, and they even rented a violin duo for ambiance. I was behind the grill, because of course I was. Lindsay told me I was great with people, and her dad said I had a charismatic way with tongues. So I stood there for over an hour flipping chicken and veggie skewers, smiling at people who didn't remember my name, serving cocktails to Paul's golf buddies who kept calling me Lenny. At some point, I slipped away to grab a drink and escape the heat. I wandered over to one of the patio tables where a group of guests were gathered, most of them half drunk, laughing too loud. I cracked open a beer and waited for a moment to join in. It had been a while since I'd spoken up in a group. I just wrapped this branding project for a distillery out in Hilliard, I said. Clean, minimal look, full redesign. I think it might be my favorite thing I've done in a long time. Brianna, who was lounging on a cushioned chair with her sunglasses pushed up on her head like a tiara, turned to me with a smirk. If you vanished tomorrow, she said, would anyone even notice? I blinked. What? She laughed as if it were all in good fun. I mean, come on, Dan, you're always just there, helpful, background vibes. The table erupted in laughter. Lindsay was sitting right beside her. She didn't say a word, just sipped her wine and smiled like it was all part of the joke. And that's when it hit me. They weren't mean. Not intentionally. They just genuinely didn't see me as a real person. I was a prop, a pleasant utility. I didn't argue, I didn't shout, I just raised my beer and said, guess we'll find out. And I walked away. I didn't go back to the grill. I didn't look for Lindsay. I walked through the side gate, down the driveway, and drove back to the condo. I packed a duffel bag with 3 days worth of clothes, grabbed my laptop and sketch pad, wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter, taking some space. Don't call. Then I left. I spent the night in a cheap motel off I-70, the kind with loud air conditioners and faded carpet. I laid there staring at the ceiling, playing the backyard scene over and over in my head, wondering if they even noticed I'd gone. Spoiler, they didn't. The next morning, I turned off my phone, drove south, ate at a diner where no one knew my name, opened my sketch pad, and filled 3 pages with ideas that had nothing to do with wine tastings or brunch logos. It was the first time in months I made something for myself. Back in Columbus, I imagined Lindsay waking up, finding the note, reading it, and texting her group chat for advice on how to handle Dan's little episode. I could practically hear her mom saying, "He'll come back. He always does." But I didn't. Not after a day. Not after a week. I waited. Waited for a call, a message, an apology, but not one person from her family reached out. Not Paul, not Denise, not Brianna, not even Lindsay. And that was when it finally sank in. I had disappeared from their lives, and it didn't change a single thing. The work was small, but it felt real again. I crashed on my old friend Nate's couch. He lived above a used bookstore in Cincinnati and brewed his own beer in a bathtub-sized bucket. Rent was cheap. The nights were loud. But for the first time in years, nobody expected anything from me. At first, I just slept, days at a time, like my body had finally gotten permission to shut down. Then, I started picking up small design gigs, flyers for local music venues, logos for Etsy sellers, menu redesigns for a vegan cafe that paid in smoothies. Not glamorous, not steady, but mine. I found a sliding scale clinic for therapy. My counselor was named Glenn, wore cardigans and had this slow, patient voice like he'd seen 1,000 burnt-out guys before me. On our third session, he asked me, "When was the first time you felt like you didn't belong?" It caught me off guard, but the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. It wasn't that barbecue. It wasn't even Lindsay's dad offering to upgrade the ring. It was way back, the very first time Lindsay introduced me at a brunch as not really a career guy, but super creative. That moment, that smile, it was the blueprint. She never saw me as a partner, just a charming little side project. A few months in, I moved to Spokane. My sister Cassie had been begging me to visit for years. She ran a small landscaping company, lived in a converted garage, and cooked like someone raised in the Midwest with butter, salt, and no fear. I rented a one-bedroom near the edge of town. The floors creaked, the heater groaned, but it was quiet, mine. Word got around that I did design work, and slowly the calls came in. A tattoo shop needed a rebrand. A bike repair co-op wanted a punchy poster. A local brewer with a peanut butter porter asked for help with label art. I said yes to everything. No contracts, no boardrooms, no wine and cheese meetings where people smiled too wide and said nothing real. Just work. Honest, weird, scrappy work. I spent my mornings in a coffee shop sketching on napkins, my afternoons answering emails and taking walks by the river. At night, I'd cook pasta and listen to old playlists from college. One client, a brewery with mismatched bar stools and a dog named Kevin, won a regional award for packaging design. They mentioned me by name in the press release, tagged me on their socials, even gave me a free hoodie with their logo on it. It wasn't a big deal. Not to most people. But to me, it was the first time in years someone publicly acknowledged my work without asking who I was married to. Cassie took a photo of me wearing the hoodie and grinning like a kid. She framed it and hung it in her hallway under a crooked nail. "Dan, the designer," she wrote on the back. And that's what people started calling me. Not Lindsay's husband. Not very creative. Just Dan. The money wasn't great. I still drove an ancient Corolla with a busted radio, but every time I finished a job, I felt something I hadn't in years. Proud. Not proud because someone else approved. Proud because I made something that mattered to someone. I stopped checking Lindsay's socials, stopped wondering if her family noticed I was gone, stopped needing them to. Because every time I clicked open Photoshop or thumbed through sketches or handed a client a final draft, I remembered. I didn't vanish. I just finally came into view. The project wasn't about revenge, it was about proving something to myself. 8 months after I walked out of Lindsay's life, she texted me, "Are you okay? I saw your name on the brewery's site." I stared at the message for a long time, sitting in the back booth of a diner off East Sprague. My laptop was open, half a logo draft on the screen, and I had grease on my thumb from helping Cassie move her old grill. I didn't reply. A week later, a message came through my website inbox. It was from an agency based in Chicago, acting on behalf of a client who wanted branding work for a new eco product line. They included a generous budget, vague timelines, and said the client was a family owned logistics firm based in Ohio. I didn't even have to Google it. The Caldwell Group, Paul's company. I almost deleted the email, almost. Instead, I created a new business name, Old River Studio, got a quick DBA, spun up a fresh domain, and responded professionally. We set up a meeting over Zoom. I wore a colored shirt and introduced myself as Dan Weston, lead designer and brand consultant. No mention of Columbus, no personal ties. They liked my early concepts: clean lines, earthy tones, simple serif fonts with texture. I emphasized authenticity, sustainability, the human side of logistics. 3 weeks later, I signed the contract. It was only after the paperwork was done, after the first payment hit my account, that I told the agency who I was. Their rep, a polite guy named Jeremy, blinked for a moment. Wait, like Lindsay Caldwell's? Ex-husband, I said calmly. But I'm not here for that. I'm here for the work. He nodded, still processing. Honestly, I don't think they know. That's fine, I said. They will. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't want to, but I needed them to see what they'd overlooked, that I hadn't vanished. I had just changed angles. A week into the project, I got a PDF titled Internal Stakeholder Notes. I scanned the list, expecting Paul, maybe Denise, but there, third name down, Brianna Caldwell, Branding Review Committee. I laughed out loud. I imagined her opening my pitch deck, reading the copy, the tagline, delivering clean starts with seeing the whole path. It wasn't just a clever slogan. It was the truth. You couldn't run a clean operation by pretending parts of your process didn't matter. Same with families. Same with people. The agency sent over feedback. Brianna's notes were minimal, just a few nitpicks about the font spacing and a request for more modern earth tones. I adjusted it, but I didn't bend. This time they were clients. And I was the professional. I wasn't there as someone's husband. I wasn't there plus one. I was there because I did good work, because I had rebuilt something from the ground up. The calls were different now. Zoom links, shared Figma files, Slack pings. They didn't ask about my background. They just asked for revisions, for deliverables, for my rates. And that was enough. It wasn't a grand comeback or a dramatic revenge arc, just steady work, clear boundaries. But inside I felt it, the quiet satisfaction of being seen, not through anyone else's lens, not filtered by a family tree, but for the quality of what I made. That, more than any comeback line or clever jab, was what I'd been waiting for. They'd forgotten me. But they hired me, and that was the most satisfying irony of all. They didn't see me coming, but I didn't need them to anymore. The product launch gala was held at the Roseview Country Club, same place where I'd once stood silently beside Lindsay, holding her clutch while she introduced me as the creative one. Same chandeliered ballroom, same valet stand out front. This time, I pulled up in a freshly detailed pickup I'd bought outright, wearing a tailored navy shirt and the only blazer I owned that didn't smell like someone else's cologne. The Caldwell Group's new eco brand was the talk of the logistics industry. Clean packaging, slick messaging, polished presentation decks that their execs barely understood but were more than happy to take credit for. I'd designed all of it. I wasn't there to network. I didn't care about the speeches or the awards or the industry buzzwords being tossed around like hors d'oeuvres. I just came to finish the job. I signed in at the welcome table under Old River Studio, got a name badge, walked in with a slim portfolio folder tucked under my arm, not to show off, but to remind myself who I was. Near the appetizer station, I saw Lindsay and her dad standing beside a group of execs in charcoal suits. Lindsay's hair was shorter than before. Her dress was cream-colored, understated but expensive. She looked up and froze for a second. Paul turned, blinked twice. Didn't realize you were the lead on this, he said finally. Most folks don't, I said, giving him a polite nod. Lindsay's expression was unreadable. Not angry, not smug, just surprised. We stood in silence for a moment. She looked like she wanted to say something, but one of the other execs swooped in to shake Paul's hand, and I slipped away. I moved through the room like a ghost with purpose. Not hiding, but not lingering either. I didn't need to prove anything. During the short award ceremony, one of the speakers announced that the Caldwell Eco Initiative had won a regional design recognition for brand clarity and sustainability messaging. I stayed in my seat in the back, sipping a ginger ale. Afterward, Brianna found me. She wore a black cocktail dress and carried herself like someone who expected every room to revolve around her. She looked at my name tag, then at me. "You're the one behind the voice, huh?" she asked, swirling her drink. "The tone is surprisingly elegant. Subtle. I liked it." "Appreciate that," I said. She smiled, head tilted. "I'd love to know who your writer is." I let the silence hang for half a beat. "That would be me." Her smile faltered for a blink, just long enough. "Oh," she said. "Well, nice work." She walked away a few seconds later, heels tapping, probably trying to figure out how she'd missed the connection. But that was the thing. They'd never been looking. They hadn't seen me when I was under their roof, folding laundry, planning parties, quietly building something they never bothered to ask about. And now? Now I was here, not as Lindsay's husband, not as a family favor, but as the guy who built their award-winning brand voice from scratch. As I left that night, I passed the valet who smiled and handed me my keys without needing to ask my name. I got in my truck, turned the radio low, and drove home through the quiet streets of the city where I used to feel invisible. Now I was known, not for who I'd married, but for what I'd made. And that made all the difference. Closure wasn't about answers, it was about letting go of the need for them. Lindsay found me outside, just past the hedge-lined courtyard of the country club. The air smelled like overwatered grass and vanilla-scented bug spray. I had one hand in my pocket, the other holding the key fob to my truck, ready to go. I heard her heels before I saw her. "Dan," she said, breathy, like she'd just jogged. She hadn't. I turned. She was standing under one of those decorative lamps, hair pulled back, arms crossed. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then gave a small nod. I didn't owe her anything, but I was curious, maybe a little tired too. We sat on a stone bench by a fountain, the water gurgling awkwardly like it was trying to fill the silence for us. She started with a soft sigh. "You really surprised them in there." "Didn't do it for them," I said. "I know," she replied and looked down. I've been following your work, kind of quietly. You've come a long way." I didn't say anything. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said after a pause. But it wasn't the kind of apology that felt earned. It was light, careful, measured. "I'm sorry if we made you feel unseen," she continued, "but you never really let us help you. That stopped me." I turned to face her, my voice calm. "You all made it pretty clear what kind of help that would be." She flinched slightly but recovered. "We were just trying to give you a foundation." "No," I said. "You wanted me to disappear into yours." She bit her lip, looked away. "Okay, maybe we handled things wrong, but I still think about you, about us." I stood up. She looked up at me, hopeful. "Do you want to grab dinner sometime?" she asked. "Not to fix anything, just to talk." I shook my head, no. Not angrily, not bitterly, just no. She blinked. "Seriously." "I've already done my talking," I said. "I'm not angry anymore, Lindsay, but I'm not interested in going back to a place that never saw me in the first place." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I looked at her one more time, not as a woman I missed, but as someone I finally saw clearly. "I hope your life's good," I said. "Really, but I've got mine now." I walked back through the parking lot, past the glowing windows and the wine glasses clinking behind glass doors. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the Caldwell Group's in-house brand team. Brianna again. They wanted to offer a long-term contract. Said they admired my creative integrity and thought I'd be a good fit. I didn't reply right away. I waited a day. Then I wrote back, short and clean. "Thank you for the offer. I'm not available for future projects. All the best." No drama, no fire, just clarity. Because the power wasn't in proving anything to them. It was in realizing I didn't have to. I disappeared from their world, but found something better in my own. 6 months after the gala, I opened a studio in a converted warehouse in downtown Spokane. Exposed brick, secondhand furniture, and a leaky skylight that lit the place like a spotlight during rainstorms. It was perfect. I partnered with 2 other freelancers, Jamie, a brand strategist with a gift for storytelling, and Theo, a motion designer who could make a coffee cup look like a Pixar short. We pooled our clients, split the rent, and hung a crooked sign that read Old River Studio above the chipped blue door. We worked on everything: skate brand packaging, indie bookstore logos, museum posters, coffee labels, bike shop rebrands. Our projects didn't come from boardrooms, they came from farmers markets, garage startups, and tattoo parlors with a dream. We didn't have to network in blazers, we just did the work and let it speak. I bought a used pickup in cash, nothing fancy, but it didn't shake at 70 like the Corolla used to. I remodeled a small rental studio with reclaimed wood, filled it with secondhand plants, and built a narrow garden box on the balcony. Tomatoes, basil, a couple of sad cucumbers. They thrived anyway. Cassie called me Mr. Domestic and brought over lemon bars when she thought I looked tired. On Sundays, we'd go to the lake, no phones, just sandwiches and cheap lawn chairs. My clients started coming by referral. One mural led to a coffee shop redesign. A brewery project turned into a restaurant group retainer. Nobody asked where I went to school or who I was married to. They didn't care about my LinkedIn. They just wanted the work, and the work was good. I even started sketching for fun again. Pen on paper, no deadlines. I printed a series of designs, abstract shapes and layered typography, and sold a few at a local arts fair. It wasn't about money, it was about making things with my hands again. One of the prints, a black and white piece called Framework, ended up hanging in a Seattle cafe. I didn't know until a friend texted me a photo. It showed the cafe's brunch crowd, all sleek hair and button-downs, with the print centered on a brick wall behind the espresso machine. My friend's message just read, "Recognize this? Guess who's hosting a charity brunch under it? Your ex-MEL." Denise. I stared at the image for a while. My design, her space. No introduction. No names, just there, silent and visible. I didn't feel smug, didn't even laugh. I just nodded to myself, because that's the thing about building something real. It shows up, whether people know it's yours or not, and I didn't need to be in their rooms anymore. I had made my own. The joke had been on me for too long. Now the punchline was mine. The anniversary of that barbecue rolled around on a Friday, exactly 1 year since Brianna asked if anyone would notice if I vanished. I remembered the look on her face, the way the table laughed, the silence that followed when I stood up and walked away. I didn't dwell on it. Instead, I made ribs. $70 smoker off Craigslist, hissing in the corner of my balcony like an old train. I basted them in a chipotle glaze I'd invented by accident, drank cheap beer from a local brewery I'd designed a label for, and played old vinyl records through a crackly speaker that Nate swore added texture. The co-op crew came over, Jamie, Theo, Cassie, a couple of clients turned friends. We filled paper plates with potato salad, argued about fonts, and told stupid stories about nightmare clients who wanted just a few quick tweaks that turned into total rewrites. Around 10, I stood up, bottle in hand, and said, "To vanishing acts." They laughed, clueless. They didn't know the whole story. That was fine. That was the point. Because back then, when Brianna asked if anyone would notice if I disappeared, the answer had felt like a punch to the gut. Now, I knew exactly who would notice. Cassie, who called every Sunday. Jamie, who sent dumb memes when I stayed up too late editing. Theo, who'd learned to read my silences and knew when to slide a coffee across the desk without saying a word. I'd become someone who mattered, not for what I could give or who I was married to, but for the person I'd rebuilt from the pieces. The next morning, I checked my email over pancakes. A subject line caught my eye. Panel invitation, SoCal Design Summit, sponsored by the Caldwell Group. I clicked. They wanted me to keynote a design panel in Los Angeles. Authenticity in brand storytelling. All expenses paid. Creative freedom. Big audience. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my fork. There it was. The company that once treated me like an accessory was now promoting my voice. The family that once ignored me now existed in the orbit of my work and didn't even realize it. But I didn't see it as revenge. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. I accepted the invitation, wrote the talk over 3 quiet nights, and included one line near the end that no one but me would truly understand. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your story is to walk out of someone else's. And when I stood on that stage, clean lines behind me, full room ahead, I didn't think about the jokes or the smirks or the quiet disapproval. I thought about the ribs, the music, the way it felt to finally take up space in a life that was entirely my own. And I smiled, because this was mine.